This is Kage.
Along with Neff.
And Buttons.
And today we are talking about the era of adaptation. And I think the biggest era, the adaptation I can think of aside from books is video game movies. There are not a lot of video game movies, or at least not a lot of good ones. And I'm speaking to you as a gamer myself. This is just my opinion, but I want to say like some of the best video game adaptations out there are ones that don't necessarily follow the story beat for beat. Right now, I'm going to say Mortal Kombat from 1995. That was pretty solid back in the day, as well as Mortal Kombat 2021. Really enjoyed that. Uncharted, for those that didn't see that with Tom Holland, that was actually very good. That was not a retelling of Uncharted, but rather taking elements from all four games and to make a new story. So I commend them for that. Silent Hill, I really enjoyed the first Silent Hill movie. Detective Pikachu. Buttons is laughing at me, y'all, but I don't care. It's a great movie. Detective Pikachu,
it's just
come
a
on.
good time.
It's a great time. What are you talking about? It was a really good time. I questioned Ryan Reynolds as a Pikachu, but it worked.
It's because Ryan Reynolds.
Well, yeah. Well, like, I didn't know what to expect, like, is he going to be snarky, like Deadpool humor? Obviously, it's not rated R, but I was like, I just had all kinds of things in my mind. What is Pikachu going to say?
Kage, let me just put it to you this way. Ryan Reynolds, when it comes to voice acting, he cannot really do anything poorly. It would be like saying that Robin Williams was going to do the voice acting and you expected it to be horrible. It's just not going to happen.
You are not wrong. I completely stand by that. Another video game type movie, Ready Player One. I did not read the book. Absolutely loved that movie. I love Ready Player One. It is just a damn good time.
That movie is 100% nostalgia. For
anybody
who grew up in the 80s and 90s. It is just 100%, hey, here's your childhood on the big screen.
The story is so good, but aside from the story and the special effects, it's just a really good time going down memory lane. Every time I watch that movie, I see something new that I didn't catch before. When you watch Ready Player One, watch the background at all times. I guarantee you will see a character from a game, a show that you played or watched in the 80s and 90s, and even some newer stuff. It's very fascinating. Everybody cheered when they saw the Iron Giant. Heck yeah, that's really cool. Super Mario Brothers, very recent one, 2023. I saw that. That was really good. Really good. We won't talk about the Mario movie back in the 90s.
Hey, don't hate on that one. I mean, it was terrible, but it was still a good time.
Listen, when I was a kid, it was a good time, okay? I enjoyed myself.
It does not hold up.
It does not hold up. I think the only the redeeming thing I can say about the original Mario Brothers movie was the elevator scene where they grab the shoulders of... They called them Goombas, and they're just sitting there rocking back and forth, and eventually they had all of them doing it. And I'm like, even as a kid, I was like, what? I mean, this is funny, but what's going on right now? Another video game movie, Final Fantasy VII Advent Children. I thought that was really good. I'm a huge Final Fantasy VII fan. Definitely looking forward to Rebirth coming out at the end of February. And I like that because I was a big fan of the original game, and this kind of tells a story that takes place right after the events of that game. So that's why that's good. Do you guys have any? Do you guys have or know of like good video game adaptations?
So a couple on my list that I had kind of intertwined with yours. I had Silent Hill on here. I know people have their subjective opinions upon Silent Hill. I thought the movie was decent. Mario was on there. I mean, blockbuster, family friendly, right? Super Mario is easy to kind of get to that audience. It's just a fun game. I think everybody likes Mario. I've never heard somebody that plays video games say they don't like Mario. It's simple. You know what I mean? Simple concept, cool, family oriented. It worked in the box office. Tomb Raider. I have Tomb Raider on there.
Tomb Raider, good
So yeah, that was one I thought was very interesting. There's a lot of stuff I'd like to see, but those are just a couple that I have. I can't really think of many more off top that I just thought were like, oh, these are like really good, video game adaptations. Did they do a World of Warcraft movie?
Yes.
They did.
I don't know how that did, but I know they did that. They took their shot at that.
I saw it. It was, I think it was like mid 2000s that it came out, like, or
Yeah.
later 2000s. It was heavy CG that wasn't always that great. I think they gave it a pretty good budget though. The story wasn't terrible. I mean, I never played the game, so I couldn't say one way or the other if it was like on par with the stories from the game franchise. But I think it ultimately fell kind of flat for anybody who wasn't familiar with the franchise, and I don't think it was well received with the people who were familiar with it.
Right. Buttons, do you have anything on your list?
Well, so I mean, obviously, the biggest ones for me, as far as what I watched and followed, of course, being, I think we already hit on a lot of them. But I mean, most recently, I think a lot of people gave hate to Uncharted. I don't think it was awful. I mean, I don't think it's spanning another sequel. Neff and I have talked about it before. I think that they gave a lot of love to the fans, especially with some of the scenes, like one of the most famous ones from the game, I think, was that airplane scene where he's falling out
beginning
of
of the film. Yeah,
exactly,
the film.
yeah. So I mean, I know they tried to give it a lot of love. Tomb Raider, like you said, was always I grew up playing those games, and honestly, I feel like the first one at least was pretty on par with what the game was like.
Yeah.
So that one was real easy for me to follow. The only other one, and I'm not 100% sure because I never played the game, but Wing Commander is a throwback to, I want to say that one came out in the late 90s. Because that one was like Freddie Prinze Jr.
Right.
and
Yeah, right.
And that one was just a good time, and it didn't rely a lot on special effects. I think they had some green screen going on, and a lot of the stuff is filmed when they're in like a cockpilot, or
The cockpit?
cockpit, yes,
Yep.
excuse me, the cockpit, yeah. So I don't think that they had to do too much with special effects, and I think that actually helped them. So yeah, they did have some CGI in there, but it didn't feel like it was so much CGI that it was distracting.
Or it's
even though it's
overwhelming,
even though it's set in space, it felt more like a space version of Top Gun in a lot of ways.
Interesting.
Not wrong.
So I mean, that one I thought was, and again, I can't really compare it to the game because I didn't play the game, but I enjoyed that movie. I've rewatched that movie, and I think it still holds up. It's just an entertaining movie to me.
So another couple films that I'm going to throw in there, I'm going to throw in Resident Evil. I think that's one of the biggest video game to film adaptations. You know what I mean?
I thought we mentioned Resident Evil. We didn't.
Did we mention Resident Evil? I don't think we did.
Oh, yeah,
Silent Hill was the one we mentioned, and then I'll throw in Street Fighter, the Street Fighter movie. So
We could
whether people liked it and thought it was a great film, that's different. But this is a video game adaptation that if you say, people know, like, oh, I remember how cheesy that was. Like,
Well, and I guess if we're gonna get too far into it, I will say that there's been those animated ones that Kage kind of mentioned Detective Pikachu, but there was the original Pokemon movie.
Oh, okay. No, you're absolutely right.
That was pretty
Forgive me,
big.
everybody. That I should have mentioned that, and that was good. I do remember seeing that.
And I'm not talking about the cheesy one where Pikachu talks at the end of the movie. I'm talking about
Mew?
back in.
the one with Mew.
Yeah, Mewtwo. Mewtwo up in here. All right, that one. not the one that they did. I think that one was like late 2017-ish, because it was like a big deal because everybody was like, "Oh my God, Pikachu can talk! What the hell?"
Yeah.
And then of course the other one I'm going to mention that was well received, and it was not a big. I mean, it was a big game, but it was a big deal. It's got 2 movies, which is Angry Birds. So kind of I think Angry Birds was more of like a video, or not like a video, like a mobile game for your phone. And they were like, hey, you know what? Let's create this
why
Angry
not?
Birds, and nobody drink the
I
water.
noticed they really, like, for the most part, I think they kind of hit like trendy games because they're like, okay, the fan base is excited about something. Let's throw something else out there, see if we can kind of capitalize off that excitement when it's hot. You know what I mean?
Angry Birds is crazy popular. Everyone's played it. Myself has played it. So I think that was an easy, like a low-hanging fruit, and I don't mean that in a bad way. I heard good things about Angry Birds movie. I won't lie to you. Haven't seen it.
It's cute.
Where-
It's a kid's movie. It's cute though.
I'm not going to knock that one bit. I will absolutely see it. You know, if you got a good cast, a good story, good actors, I'm on board, you know?
Yeah. How are you feeling about the video game industry as it stands right now, Kage and Buttons? I'll let Kage answer first on
So,
this.
how do I feel about the video game industry? I feel like there's a lot of interesting things going on right now. A lot of controversial things, unfortunately. You know, like one of the biggest complaints of gamers these days is the increase of microtransactions. Gamers, myself included, absolutely miss the days back in the 90s, back in the early 2000s, when you buy a game and you get it. That's what's on there, and you don't have to pay any extra. Well, now developers are coming out with games, and they're like, your game costs $70, but if you want a little extra, we're going to charge $40. I'm like, that's like half the game right there. You know what I mean? Like, you're just nickeling and diming me. And PC games are really criminal about this, because what they'll do, and I can't speak for all, but they will include the DLC, the downloadable content, for those that don't know what that means. They'll include the downloadable content on the game. It's already there. And if you know anything about computers, you can actually go into the config ini file, hit edit it, and hit equal true, and boom, you just unlocked that DLC. And now you don't have to pay $40. You're welcome, nerds. But
Don't come after us, lawyers.
No.
Don't do it.
I did not invent that, by the way. Look, it's been going on
He's
for
just
decades.
the
so-
messenger.
Just the messenger. I did not create that, but like microtransactions is a really big problem in the gaming world. Another, I guess, problem is kind of like the movie industry. Is like we have so many sequels to games, like we've talked about in the past. Original ideas, they're still out there. They're still coming, but I feel like it's almost too easy.
Few and far between.
Yeah, it's too easy to say, oh, everybody liked Halo, everybody made Call of Duty, so let's just make another one, tack another number, upgrade the graphics, add some new guns, new place, and charge you $70, and we'll call it a day. Come on, people, let's get in the writing room, and let's make a good story. Now, every gamer is different. Sometimes you have people that don't care about story. You just want to jump in and play something for a little while and jump out. Absolutely no problem with that. To each his own. Me, I'm like movies. That's why we're all here. I like a good story. And for me, playing a good game, a good story is a lot like reading a good book. You know what I mean? And getting really lost and invested. And when the credits roll to an end of a good movie, just like when I'm playing a game, when the credits roll, and if I played something really good, man, I am on Wikipedia. I'm looking up.
Doing research.
I'm doing lore research. Like, I love lore. I love that so much. And then I'll start looking up behind the scenes. I'll start looking up, what's the future of this franchise, of this game? Is there going to be a franchise for this game? So things like that. I think a big thing we have going on in the video game industry is there's a lot of copycats out there. So
good point.
Shout out to, and here's where I'm going to get some hate. Sorry, gamers. Power World. That is a huge ripoff of Pokemon, but it clearly found its audience because it's Pokemon with guns.
And who doesn't like guns?
And who doesn't like guns? America. So, so I mean that's and Nintendo can't really do anything about that.
Interesting. I think right now, as far as the landscape of video games in the gaming industry, it's at its, I'm not going to say its height because we don't know the future, but I think based upon the expansion of the internet, it's hit a different level.
Yeah, and kind of
So much accessibility with video games. It's like almost everybody's on something. You know what I mean? Like, oh, I game. What do you game on? You know, there's so many different subgenres within the video game market, right? Even
And
I remember when
one-
the Wii came out. That's gaming to an extent, right? Then you had the PC. PC's still big. World of Warcraft, we talked about that earlier. That was a big deal. Halo on the Xbox, Metal Gear Solid on the PlayStation, sports games, 2K, Madden. There's so many fighting games. I mean, come on. There's so many different subgenres within that market. I just feel like video gaming right now is at a high. And I think the sales are crazy too. Like we said, you know, they bank up off of legacy, I guess, IPs, you know what I mean? And so they're like, this is easy money, let's go attack
Call
it.
of Duty.
Right, and we see it in cinema. That's why we brought this topic up. It's the same thing, but once again, I don't know if there's necessarily a lack of ideas for new games. I just think that, you know, people try to take the easy route out sometimes and they try to attach themselves to something that's kind of already established and they try to make money off that. Or a lot of companies probably don't want to fund some of these new ideas because they're like, how much is it going to cost? Is the idea going to stick? You know what I mean? Same thing with cinema, but I think it's worse than cinema. I feel like video games is it's a market that's actually way more innovative than cinema at this point. There's so many directions you can go in with it.
You know, another problem before we move on to the next topic is so there's a thing now. We live in the digital age right now, and so there's already been studios that have been saying, what is it? An executive from Ubisoft said recently that there's going to come a point where we as gamers are not going to own our games anymore. In other words, physical copies are going out the window.
Cease to exist.
Will cease to exist, and you will pay a subscription fee to have access to your games.
Get it from the
And
cloud.
Right, and that's kind of rustling a lot of feathers, to put it mildly. I know games nowadays are $70 on the upper end. They're $69, $70. And when I don't know about you, but like when I pay for something, when I have a disc in my hand, that is mine. And you are not going to take that away from me. You're not going to tell me, like, screw you. Like, we pay for Xbox Live and PlayStation Network and things like that, sure. But my being able to play that game should not be determined by that. If I own that game and my internet goes down, bad weather or whatever, I should still be allowed to play my game.
Access
now,
that,
and again, it depends. If we're talking about MMOs like World of Warcraft, you're always online all the time. That makes sense why you couldn't play that. But I've seen single player games where you can't play. I'm like, really? I'm not playing with anybody, and you're gonna because I can't connect to the internet. Like, so the internet, it's a double-edged sword. It lets us play with our friends, but it's coming and it's starting to change. Also, we talked about it in a previous podcast where we talked about AI. Okay, developers are incorporating AI into their game design, and that you can go either way with that. It really depends on the context, but my opinion, we need to have people more hands-on behind the scenes at a computer. I can't think of a story, so I'm just going to type in something in what was it?
Chat GPT.
ChatGPT. Let's figure out. Okay, that computer figured out a story for me. Great. I'm like, no, I want to see something that has a soul. You know. But yeah, that's something that I think about.
Good points. Buttons, you have anything as far as the video game industry and where it's sitting right now?
So I will say that, you know, we've got our good adaptations that we mentioned before as far as bringing them into movies. And I do agree with Kage that we have a lot of good storytelling going on. I mean, if you go back and look at the history of video games, obviously you're talking about the complexity wasn't there. As the technology has progressed, you're able to add in, you know, more of those elements that make it feel like you're watching a movie. You know, I know the first time I sat down and was playing Final Fantasy X, I was like, man, those cutscenes, they might as well be a movie because they were movie quality. And, you know, they tried to do some movies for Final Fantasies. I think it was like The Spirits Within. I watched it, and when I first saw the cover art for that, I was like, is that live action or is that animated? And it took me a second, and I was like, oh, it is animated. And then I was like, oh my gosh, that's really good animation quality for its time, you know. So it was one of those things where I watched the movie. Was it a great movie compared to the game? Not really. I think the game was better, but you know, it was still another example of them trying to take a video game and find a way to adapt it into movies for the audience. But then you have like the ones that are just awful and they're just grasping at straws and they're taking any kind of content and just trying to make it stick. Rampage is an example of one where I was like, this was a video game and they somehow managed to turn it into a movie where even The Rock couldn't save it.
Rampage was an awesome video game.
Right, and a lot of people loved the video game, but the movie, I'm sorry, I
don't think it panned out well.
I don't feel like it was, I don't think it was worth what I'm sure they spent a ridiculous amount of money on the budget for that movie for. And so I feel like, you know, you're going to always have that. You're going to have people who are like, oh, this is great. Let's go ahead and turn this into a movie. And some games, they're just not really there. I think in some ways, if you're going to do something based off of a video game, for one thing, please don't give me the exact same story. Like, I don't want to watch, if I've played the video game, I don't want to go watch the story. I mean, for the people who have played Red Dead Redemption, I mean, tell me, do you want to watch a movie version of the game? Because why would you? The whole game itself, that game was so well received. You know, the second one, very well received. But I don't think anybody's going to want to sit down and watch all the cutscenes put together and in a movie format and be like, oh, let me go pay an extra $20 to go see this in the theaters. I don't, you know, me and my significant other, we're going to go sit down and watch it again after I played it for, you know, I don't know what the average play time was. I'm just going to throw out 20 hours playing this game.
Good point there. It's funny because I brought up a question to a couple people, like saying, all right, I believe I talked to Kage about this. I said, how could we adapt like GTA 5 into a movie? And I said, oh, there's a movie that's basically like GTA 5. It's Heat. So that's an example of how Rockstar could take that open world map and all the cutscenes, cut it down. Heat's a 3-hour movie, but you can cut it down to a movie adaptation. Now, Heat is not, of course, based on GTA 5 because Heat came out in 1995, I believe. But to me, that story is damn near the same as GTA 5. Bank heist, guy kind of goes to jail, kind of retires, comes back. You know what I mean? It's like the same premise. And specifically, the end sequence of that movie is really like reminiscent of GTA 5 in that last mission. If anybody played that, I'm sure damn near everybody has. But yeah, moving on. What video games would we like to see adapted that haven't been already? Kage, I'll start with you.
So this kind of leads into something I heard Button say. So it really depends on the game. Because if it is a really solid story, just like a book, audiences, gamers are going to want to see. I want to see who you pick as your cast. I want to see what kind of special effects you use. I want to see how you depict this scene. And that's kind of the excitement from a gamer's perspective, is I want to see how you're going to deliver that scene. Is it going to invoke the same emotions that it did? Now, obviously, Angry Birds, it's a mobile game. There's no story in the mobile game, versus The Last of Us, a huge story-driven game. And we talked about it in previous episodes. You know, when you're doing a remake or an adaptation, you want to follow the source material. And when you go and do your own thing, just know you're doing it at your own peril. It doesn't mean it's going to be bad, but just tread lightly, directors. You know, when you're doing it. That being said, some movies I think would be very good at having a movie, and I would like to see some of those. So for me personally, I I almost want to dare say this is my number one, BioShock. I would love to see BioShock. It has sci-fi and horror elements. Very old game from, I want to say 2007, maybe. And you have powers, but you also have weapons, and you're trying to find your way through the underwater city of Rapture and find out. And there's a huge plot twist at the end. But I feel like if that had a high budget, that would be an amazing film. Another one here we go. BioShock movie is coming. Okay, thank you very much, Buttons, for pointing that out. So yes, as I was saying that, Buttons pointed out to me that there is a BioShock. Is it a movie or miniseries?
It's going to be a movie. Netflix announced it at the end of last year that they were going to,
Okay.
that they're in works.
Okay.
So it's not, they haven't released anything official as far as cast or like the actual story being finished. They're just like, hey, we're in development.
I'm on board. Let's go. I'm signing up. Sounds amazing. So definitely looking forward to that. This is something I want. I want a dark, nitty gritty Resident Evil movie. And right now, folks, Neff is giving me a look. Let me
Go
explain.
more into detail.
Let's go into detail. So Resident Evil, as everyone knows, has been around as far as movies. It's been around for a while, just like the Fast and the Furious movies. We have a lot of Resident Evil movies at this point, all starring Mila Jovovich. They are entertaining in their own right, but for any gamer out there, no, they're doing their own. They're completely going off rails, doing their own thing. There's no such thing as Alice.
Right.
You know, I think the best out of all the Resident Evil movies that we have would be the first one. They
Right.
have the mansion, they have the liquors, when you have your monsters looking straight, like plucked right out of the movie, great job.
Right.
Acting, I was okay with that. But then, and like the hive and the mansion, all of that was great. I think that was probably the closest, but then they started kind of going off the rails.
Yeah,
with
the
next
farther it
movies.
progressed, they were
The
getting
further-
away from the lore.
The weirder it gets. I think the fun of the Resident Evil movies for me is what monster are they going to show next? Don't make up another one. I want to see a realized version of one of those cool monsters that I fought in the game. You know what I mean? And it's just getting weirder and weirder. And now we have smart zombies using weapons like that. I know there's Resident Evil 4, but the ones in the movies are different than that. I don't remember which Resident Evil movie where they were all carrying M16s and they were like walking around in like suits in Russia or so. I was like, what the heck is this?
Yeah, it got weird.
You know what I mean? So when I say I want a Resident Evil movie, I want a rated R. Yes, I know we had a rated R one. It did not do well. I haven't seen it yet. I need to do justice and see that, but I think it needs to be rated R. I think you need to pull the monsters right out of the thing, get good actors, make it be serious. Don't be hokey about it. I think that's what I want to see. That's what I mean when I say I want to see a real Resident Evil movie. Let's go. Let's start from the very first one. Don't make any new characters. You already got a good story. One thing we've said in a previous podcast is when you're talking about remakes, adaptations, you want to have faith in the material. Directors trust the material. Just like the comic industry that you've been drawing from for I don't know how many years from Marvel, you have an endless supply of movies of great stories. Video games have great stories too. And you need to just trust it. You know what I mean? Stop making your own characters, stop tweaking your stories, stop. Another movie that I would love to see, Dead Space.
Yeah.
There needs to be a Dead Space movie. That needs to be a thing. The game was heavily inspired by Event Horizon with Sam O'Neill back in the 90s. Very, very good. I would love to see that. Twisted Metal. And yes, I know there's a series on Peacock about that. I heard it's getting good reviews. Twisted Metal in particular, my favorite game is Twisted Metal Black. And it's probably the darkest of the entire franchise. All the contestants, as it were, are insane. They're in an asylum, and they all have pretty interesting backstories on why they are the way they are, like Sweet Tooth, the flaming head clown. for
Right,
example,
right.
You know what I mean? But if they never made a movie and they just stuck with the show, I'd be okay with that.
Right.
You know, because video games have such a dense story, so if it won't fit in a movie format, that doesn't necessarily mean it wouldn't be better in a show format.
Right. One that stands out to me where you're talking about they kind of got away from the roots of the actual story and the lore was Max Payne. I know that movie was kind
yeah.
of odd. And some things going on in that movie. They were like, this is not at all like the video game.
Yeah.
But Buttons, you have anything as far as what you'd like to see adapted that hasn't already been attempted on
I mean,
a mass level?
I mean, there's some ones that, you know, I feel like, you know, when they did bring out the World of Warcraft movie, you know, I think that was a way for them to say, hey, we can take characters, we can take the reality or that universe or whatever and create a story within it that holds true to the video game play, but it's its own standalone within that universe. And I feel like they could easily do that with games like Skyrim. I mean, they kind of did Dungeons and Dragons, which kind of just hints off of the board game and that play. But I feel like if they wanted to even, like you said, BioShock was one of the ones that you guys mentioned as well. I feel like they could, especially because those kind of bring in different realities. And Assassin's Creed, they made the movies of those, but I don't think it was well received in the audience. So I wouldn't mind if they gave that one another shot. I mean, I saw Assassin's Creed, and I feel like it was. I just don't feel like it engaged enough of what people loved about the video games. I mean, they're still making Assassin's Creed video games. People like Assassin's Creed, and even some of the games like that are popular right now, such as Horizon Zero Dawn, that would be something that would be very interesting to see a live adaptation of. And I think it hits a lot because of our current culture that's obsessed with, you know, climate change and, you know, technology taking over. And it definitely has some Terminator vibes to it, definitely has
Post-apocalyptic.
Yeah, post-apocalyptic, you know, we all like a good apocalypse movie. So I feel like, you know, some of that fits in with a lot of what Hollywood likes to tell stories about in general. So that, I think those would be some interesting.
So I have Death Stranding by Kojima on a list. I would like to see that probably adapted into a film. But the thing about Death Stranding is, and Kage knows this very much so, it's out there, dude. It's extremely abstract sci-fi, you know, Kojima, great storyteller, very cinematic. This is why I kind of put it in there. But I think for him to put that out at a mainstream level, one, he needs a lot of funding. He needs someone that's going to believe in the project, and it needs to be I think it needs to be something that's put out once majority of the mainstream public has a better understanding of the product, because that's more abstract than Metal Gear Solid. Metal Gear Solid has a lot of abstract aspects, and I guess you could say like it's niche in its own way, but it's a lot easier to grasp, and it's a lot more grounded in reality, and it's something I think people could just relate to on screen more. I have Metal Gear Solid on there as well, but I think Metal Gear Solid is one of those stories that has a lot of depth in it. And I think for Metal Gear Solid, I don't think you could do a movie for that. I think you need to do it in a series format. So like a TV show of Metal Gear Solid, and you can start off with like Snake Eater, things like that, and then go into Phantom Pain. And I would love to see Kojima come back and actually finish up the story, because the game wasn't finished when they put it out. So I'd like to see that, maybe Phantom Pain there, and then go into Shadow Moses, and then Big Shell and the events of Sons of Liberty. And then maybe Metal Gear Solid 4. But I think the best stories that we got out of Metal Gear Solid, and people can argue it, but I'd say Snake Eater and then Metal Gear Solid 2. Shadow Moses was cool, and it's kind of like the one that broke through, right? There's other Metal Gear Solid games, but I think Shadow Moses, the events of Metal Gear Solid 1 is when it really hit PlayStation, and it hit a different populace of people. So, you know. But I think those would be great as far as movies and adaptations. I know Buttons brought up, what was the movie you brought? You said didn't do so. It was Assassin's Creed, right?
Assassin's
Let's
Creed.
talk about video game adaptations that weren't that good.
Well, that's a long list.
Kage, we'll start with you. You're
Definitely.
excited.
So unfortunately, when it comes to video game movies, while yes, like comics, there are lots of stories to draw from that movies can be made based upon. The fact is, video game movies don't really hit really well. They really don't. There are a lot of video game movies, not so many good ones. Assassin's Creed is a prime example of not a good one. It's definitely not the worst. I will say, me personally, I enjoyed it up to a point. Okay, I watched it. Michael Fassbender, I think he played the protagonist, and I was just sitting there watching it, and I'm like, okay, I'm on board. Abstergo, their name, the Templar, they're hitting all the beats. Okay, I get what you're doing. And again, and by the way, just to clarify, not long ago I mentioned that I want video game movies to stick to the original stories and don't dabble. I know I mentioned Uncharted. Uncharted does not follow that, but if you're gonna deviate from the story and you're gonna make your own story, make it good. Check with the gamers. Hey, is this something that you would like, that you would be okay us putting out? Do a test screen. I mean, I'm sure they did. And it just so happens that that's an exception. So there's going to be some video game movies that are going to be exceptions where they're not based on any one story. The World of Warcraft movie, that's an open world game. There's all kinds of stories. How can you possibly pick one to make it an hour and a half, 2 hour movie?
Right.
So if you can make a good movie from that material, all power to you. That's a brave thing to do. But if
Right.
you're going to follow the source material and that's ultimately, at me as a gamer and a movie enjoyer, I want you to do that. Follow the story.
Interesting. One that I'm going to bring up is actually a series, and it's the Halo series that came out. Now, I heard there was a lot of issues with this, but it was more specifically like the visuals. The visuals were kind of chintzy. How was the story on that, Kage? You think the story held up, or do you think it was kind of more like, what's it, ODST?
So here's the thing. I will not lie to you. I do
Yeah.
not have Paramount Plus.
Yeah.
Okay? But that is something I want to see.
Right.
However, I have been reading a ton of articles and I've seen video clips. And the Halo live action series is not good. Because they have the Master Chief, the stoic soldier, the man of few words, taking off his helmet all the time. And the directors were like, well, we need to have somebody for the people to relate to. We need to see his head. And the gamers of the audience were like, we don't care about that. Be true to the source material.
Right,
If we watch
right.
the movie with 7-foot tall super soldier in armor, we're down. Yeah. We're on board. We never see his face in the game, and we're fine with that.
Right.
You know what I mean? But also, too, I heard Master Chief has sex with somebody.
Interesting.
And there's no the closest romantic element you get from across the Halo franchise is him. There's like, there's no, I feel awkward saying this, him and Cortana, his AI assistant,
Right.
like there's kind of a relationship, not a sexual relationship,
Right.
but like that's the only relationship he knows.
Right.
Knowing your backstory of Halo, he's that AI is his closest companion.
Yeah, there's no
aside from-
female companion in Halo at all.
Right. So there's female characters in the
Right,
franchises,
right.
but no one that's super close to Master Chief, with the exception of Dr. Halsey that made the Spartan program. But kind of getting too far off topic there. But
yeah, that's the one I had for the series. There's a series there, just the Halo one. I can't really think of too many movie adaptations. We talked about Resident Evil, and how it's kind of getting strange in what they're doing with the
Right,
movie. And I
right.
think they've kind of stopped making those movies
have-
following that storyline. But they could come back and course correct and get back to the roots of Resident Evil. I know they had a Netflix show, Resident Evil. I don't know how that really worked out.
It wasn't all right. So I watched it.
I did too.
I watched it.
So
What'd you think, Buttons?
okay, so all right. So I would say that the actual effects that they did and the budget that they gave it, and even the acting choices, I feel like they were not bad. I think they had a decent budget and they had everything lined up as far as actors and the cast that they had. The story itself, It had a lot of weird, I guess you could say, more so than, and sometimes confusing elements to it, to where I'm sure if the series had continued, it would have cleared up some of the questions that I had at the end of it. And they definitely had it set up to continue. It was just one of those things that I feel like there was too many things going on within the story, almost like a story within a story within another story. And it made it challenging, in my opinion, to kind of follow what was going on. I don't think it was terrible. I would definitely say I've seen worse. And for the most part, what I think the main problem is they were trying to throw too much into it, to make it more like the game, I guess, but it didn't have the elements that I think fans wanted to see. I think that it was setting it up for a lot more and it never got there. Like it was like the first season of Walking Dead, where it's like, yeah, we're going to give you some, but it's kind of a slow burn until about towards, like, I think the last 2 episodes is when it really like started to break loose, in terms of like the action and that. And I think maybe that kind of turned fans off as well, or their audience, I should say. But all in all, I don't think it was, like I said, it wasn't the worst. I would have watched a second season to see if they took it and did better with it.
Right.
Because like I said, I feel like the first season was more of a setup for the second season.
Interesting. Were there any other adaptations you thought didn't knock it out the park for you personally?
You mean
As far as like video games that they turned into either a series, live action, or a film?
So, I mean, there definitely were others that I mentioned previously, and I had thought of one earlier, but now I can't remember because I didn't write it down.
Oh, that's fine.
Always write it down.
Always write it down.
Always write it down.
We'll
But,
come back to it though.
yeah.
I'm sure we'll bring this topic up.
Kage.
Kage, what you got?
So, real quick, I was going to say when we were talking about Assassin's Creed, I mentioned my turning point.
Yeah.
My turning point for the movie is when they showed the Animus. They're like, you're going to get in the Animus and you're going to see your past life. And I'm like, okay. And I'm like, and sitting in the theater, I'm like waiting for it. I'm like, okay, how are they going to do this? Don't make it complicated. It was a giant room with the claw. It picks him up and it's this giant room. And I'm sitting in the theater like, you guys had one job. It's a chair. It's a fancy technological chair, kind of like the Matrix, hooks in the back.
Yeah.
Doesn't hook in your neck or whatever.
But it's the same basic principle.
And it's the same principle. If it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Or the Matrix.
Yeah. And they made it super complicated, and they turned it to a ride. It lifts him up, and he's sitting there spinning. I'm sorry. You could have easily saved your budget.
Ready Player One. Come on, people. You just give him a nice little drop down, some little.
Yeah, don't make it
Hook up.
complicated. So I feel I was actually on board with the Assassin's Creed up until I saw the Animus, and after that, I'm not gonna lie to you, I almost walked out. But Doom.
Doom was one.
So Doom. Here's what I'm gonna say about Doom. I enjoyed the Doom movie. Again, to a point.
To a point.
Here it goes. I like the casting. I was okay with The Rock, Carl Urban. I was okay with all that. I was okay with the monsters that they picked out. They looked like they plucked them right out of Doom 3 in particular. And I really enjoyed the last sequence where it puts it in first person. And I'm like, I don't think I've ever seen a movie do that. We've seen first person views in movies, but not like in a game. And it was like I'm sitting in the theater. I'm like, oh man, I would love to have a controller in my hands right now, like for the immersion. I thought that was a really badass way to wrap up the movie. I have to have that sequence, so I really enjoyed that. It was set on Mars. All the monsters were straight out of Doom 3 from 2004, but that's where it ends for me. The problem for that one is they mentioned that it's an alien life form, and I'm like, okay, now you're kind of losing me. It's supposed to be they opened up a portal to hell, the UAC. They found a portal to hell. and now the demons have escaped. And it's not that deep of a concept to understand, but I guess, I don't know, Hollywood thought the audiences were too dumb to understand that. And this is an example of not trusting your source material. Like, you checked all the boxes. All you had to do was say, there's a portal
Yeah.
to hell or something.
Yeah.
And they're like, no, the people are mutating. That's Dr. Willits. And I'm like, no! I was in the theater, I was like internally screaming. I'm like, no, they're not mutated people. It's not a virus. This isn't
That's
Resident Evil.
yeah.
Stop it. Stay in your lane. It's not Resident Evil. So
Yeah.
that's bad. A bad Mortal Kombat Annihilation, we talked about that in a previous episode, was just terrible because they just tried to cram 30 years of material of characters into one movie. You know, because they thought that was a good idea. Every character had 5 minutes of screen time before they were killed off or whatever. So you're not invested in any of the characters at all. I guess, sorry buttons, 1994 Street Fighter was not a hitter for me. I saw it. I did enjoy Van Damme as Guile, and I feel bad, the actor for Gomez from Addams Family.
Oh,
He played M. Bison, right?
He played M. Bison, precisely. Unfortunately, I think that was his last performance before he passed away.
yeah, I want to say.
Really?
What was
Yeah. It was, so Buttons and I, we are doing a quick Google, so bear with us for just a moment.
I will say I remembered the other ones that I was thinking of, but Prince of Persia.
I did not see that one.
So that's, Disney took that one, and then of course, I don't know for sure if, God, John Carter, I don't know if that was a book or if that was a
John
game.
Carter was a book.
Okay.
I'm 90% certain that was
Okay,
based on a
because
book.
but
Still a good movie.
But I know Prince of Persia for sure was the game. I don't think Prince of Persia was necessarily a bad movie, and even the script wasn't terrible. I just think that they made casting choices that kind of ticked everybody off.
Yeah.
And not that they were bad actors. I like Jake Gyllenhaal as an actor. Was he Prince of Persia? Not really. And I think that kind of goes back to where, you see where it's like, oh, studios are like, we need to get butts and seats. Let's put a big name out there.
Yeah.
And that's Jake Gyllenhaal. So, and it's not that he did a bad, job of playing the character. It's just, I don't think he was what audiences envisioned. And then I think maybe if they had added a little bit more of the cultural elements into the movie, I think it would have been more
Authentic.
yeah, more authentic and, more well received as far as that goes. Because, when you're taking something that's an adaptation, yes. But it's an Americanized version of it, or even a British version. I'm not quite sure who developed that game, but it's not culturally accurate.
Yeah.
The movie was not culturally accurate. So I feel like that kind of hurt it as well. And I feel like, they tried to kind of make it more like kid-friendly, I guess, because it was Disney. And so I think people were wanting more of that R-rated version of it, and they didn't get it, and I feel like that hurt it as well.
Yeah.
Them trying to make it more, towards the younger audiences.
Something I want to say real quick. First and foremost, mad respect to Raul Julia. That was the guy, rest in peace. Big part of our childhoods for those that loved Addams Family. M. Bison, again, that was a role that I like. I wasn't big on the Street Fighter movie back in the day, but I did enjoy the interaction of those two characters, and I think that was the good casting. But kind of going off that topic, that idea right there, I think one thing that can really bring down a video game adaptation is your casting. If you put a AAA actor on there, where's your budget going? Is your budget going into paying that one actor that you're banking on to fill seats? or is that budget going towards special effects, paying, like, getting a good story, paying your good writers? I don't know about you. I would rather have B-list actors, no-name actors that I don't know, and a good story versus a muddy story and one really awesome actor.
Two other movies, because these came out very similar to each other. I think they might have been they were adaptations of something. I'm not sure if it was an anime series. I feel like one of them was, and one of them may have been a video game, but they came out really similar, real close to each other, which was Aeon Flux and Ultraviolet.
Forgot about those, yeah.
And that's because they were forgettable. They had some good elements to them, but I feel like they fell short of what they were, supposed to do. Because I feel like movie studios wanted these to become franchises, and neither one of them got off the ground enough to produce a sequel. Not the way that Underworld was doing for its...
That might be news to me, because I thought Aeon Flux was like an anime.
Aeon Flux, I think, might have been the anime
No,
one.
it was.
Right.
It was on MTV, because I'm 100 years old. and I
Good
remember
conversation there. Kage, you want to lead us out on this episode?
Yeah, so, guys, that's going to wrap it up for us. So we want to know, what are your favorite adaptations of video games? What adaptations would you like to see? Do you agree with us, disagree with us? Let us know in the comments below. As always, I want to thank you very much for listening to us. I'm Kage.
Neff.
Buttons.
And we will see you next time.